The movie starts, and we see a tutor named Ethan. He works in a private company that provides tutors to people. Ethan usually has to teach kids who happen to be from really rich families. He spends his whole day teaching kids, and in the evening, we see him spending time with his girlfriend named Annie, who is currently pregnant. Ethan makes good money through his job. The next day, he goes to the tutor company's office. He talks to a girl named Daria to tell Ethan to call his manager named Chris. Chris goes on to tell Ethan that he's become so famous that there's a client who's willing to pay him $2,500 a day to teach his kid. He is, however, told that for the trial, Ethan is gonna have to stay in his new student's home, and it'll be for a week. Chris tells him that this is all he knows, so he needs to make a decision whether he wants to take this job or not. When he comes home later, he goes on to talk to Annie about it. Chris does not want to be away for the whole week when his girlfriend is pregnant. Annie goes on to say that she's however gonna be able to manage it. She encourages him to go. The next day, a driver comes to take him in a very fancy car. Ethan gets to his new student's place, which is of course a mansion. Ethan is let in by another servant, and Ethan goes on to see his new student named Jackson. Ethan goes on to ask Jackson what he has to teach him, adding that he did not get a lot of information from the company. Ethan then asks him about his marks in his recent SATs, at which Jackson tells him that his dad's assistant is going to provide him with all the information. After that, he goes on to take a practice test of Jackson. While Jackson is writing, Ethan notices that the internet connection is bad in the house, so he makes his way out to explore the house. He goes to a garage that has a collection of vintage bikes, and Ethan is shocked to see that. He then goes into a room where a couple named Gavin and Jenny are present. Gavin is Jackson's cousin, and Ethan goes on to tell them who he is. He tells him that they're going to be staying at his place for the next whole week. He then asks Gavin if there's a landline in his place, adding that he needs to make a phone call, but the network here is really weak. Jenny goes on to tell him to go outside and try there. Ethan makes his way back to the hall where Jackson is attempting the test, and he is done by now. Ethan goes on to take a look at his answers, and all of the answers are right. Ethan is then taken to his own room. That night, he is finally able to call Annie and tells her that this place is wonderful, for real. He tells them that he saw a room where they have around 50 vintage bikes, and he's also shocked to learn that. And then Ethan talks about Jackson. He tells Annie that Jackson seems to be a really weird guy, and he tells him not to worry about that. She reminds him how much he's getting paid for this job, so she just needs her man to finish the job and get back. The next day, when he's teaching Jackson, he goes on to ask him what kind of music he likes, and Ethan then asks him about Gavin as well. At which Jackson tells him that Gavin is his cousin, who comes out to his mansion to spend summer vacations. Ethan then goes on to ask Jackson what does his dad do, at which Jackson says that he cannot tell that to him. Jackson is then asked where his mother is. He starts stuttering and then goes on to say that some people came there and took her away. Jackson then talks to his teacher and asks him about a camera he saw in his hands. He asked Ethan what kind of pictures he likes to take, and Ethan says that he likes to take photos of different people. He reveals that he also has done a course in photojournalism. Jackson then asks Ethan about the baby he's about to have, and Ethan is a little shocked now, as he wonders how on earth Jackson knows about his kid. Jackson then asks if Ethan is okay with his kid being called a bastard because he and his girlfriend are not married, and that makes their kid a bastard. Ethan says that he does not want to talk about that. Later that night, Ethan is out in the courtyard having a cigarette when he notices that Jackson is staring at him from the balcony of his big mansion. Ethan goes out in the forest to take some more pictures the next morning, and there he runs into Gavin and his two girlfriends. Gavin offers to take Ethan a lift, and Ethan accepts. On the way, Ethan feels like these two are hiding something from him. Ethan goes to teach Jackson, who asks him if he can take a picture of him as well, and Ethan feels weird, but he still goes on to take a picture of the boy. Later, when he is just about to start teaching the boy, Gavin gets there, and both of them offer Ethan that they will double his daily wage to $5,000 if he is willing to cancel today's classes. That night, when Ethan is having a call with Annie, Jackson walks into his room out of nowhere and tells him about his mother. He reveals that the woman just left them. Ethan is really weirded out by his behavior, and then Jackson goes on to get more weird as he keeps his head in Ethan's lap, starts crying, and tells him that his dad does not like him at all because he has not been able to live up to his expectations. Ethan then reveals that his dad did not like him either, which is why he has still not told his old man about the baby. Ethan adds that he was just 10 years old when his mother left him too. Ethan says that they should try to still live their best. He tells Jackson that his dad must love him for sure, but Jackson does not feel like it because his dad might not be too expressive about it. Jackson then feels a little bit better and leaves. When he's gone, Ethan is disappointed in himself for sharing his secrets with a student. The next day, Annie goes to see a friend named Miriam, who she tells that deep down she's not happy that Ethan is not with her these days. And Miriam tells her not to think about it much, adding on that things will be better when she has a baby. In the meantime, Jackson goes to see Ethan and offers him to stay a few more days, adding that they can have some fun together. But Ethan gets angry and annoyed at this. He starts yelling at Jackson, telling him that he's not his friend, he's just there to do his job, and after that, he's going to leave. Later that evening, Ethan realizes that he should not have yelled at the boy, which is why he goes to Jackson's room to apologize. But Jackson is not in his room. However, Ethan finds his laptop, and when he checks it, he sees his own private photos, and he's also there in those pictures, and in some of them, they are kissing. Ethan is shocked to his core. The next day when they are studying, Ethan goes on to apologize to Jackson and tells him that he's gonna have to leave because his girlfriend is alone. And on top of that, Jackson seems overly attached to him, at which Jackson says he just wants to get to know him and there's nothing wrong with that. Ethan tells Jackson that he saw those pictures on his laptop, and Jackson gets so angry at this that he starts beating himself and leaves. Ethan runs into his dad later, who tells him that his son is a little emotional, so he should be careful with him. Ethan leaves after completing a whole week, but when he is on his way, he receives a call from Chris, who tells him that Jackson's dad wants him to teach Jackson and be there with him for the whole summer. Chris says that they are going to pay him triple the amount he was already getting, and Ethan is shocked to learn that. The next day, Ethan goes out to have dinner with his friends and Annie, where all of them talk about their baby, and Annie reveals that it's going to be a boy. They then ask about his new student, and Ethan reveals that Jackson seems to have gotten obsessed with him. Ethan says Jackson follows him everywhere he goes, and he thinks that he can just buy him. He goes on to tell everything about Jackson to his friends in a mocking way, and all of them are shocked because Jackson sounds like a crazy guy. This is when Jackson walks up to Ethan, and Ethan is shocked to see him there. He asks Jackson what he's doing there, and Jackson reveals that his dad is the owner of the building. It is clear that Jackson has heard everything. On his way back home, Annie is disappointed in Ethan for making fun of Jackson, and Ethan says that he will apologize to him the next morning. The next day, a flashy car comes to pick up Ethan. This time he is driven to Jackson's townhouse, and when Ethan gets there, the house is empty. Ethan calls Jackson, who tells him to make himself comfortable, adding that they will be there after a while. Ethan goes on to eat some strawberries there, and after a few minutes, he goes unconscious. When he wakes up, he's in the lake. He barely manages to get out of there alive and makes his way back home. He tells Annie about everything that just happened. She tells him that he's just a kid who might have pulled a prank on him. She then asks Ethan about a woman who calls for him every day. They end up getting into an argument, and Ethan says that he too is looking for answers, but he does not have one right now. That next day, when Ethan takes a look at the pictures in his camera, he's shocked to see some of his photos in which he is sleeping or doing inappropriate things with Gavin's girlfriend named Teddy. Ethan does not remember this incident at all. He realizes that it must have happened when he ate those drugged fruits and went unconscious. Ethan now starts staying with Annie, and both of them apologize to each other. Ethan has not received another call from Jackson, and when he contacts Jackson's school to ask about him, he learns that they do not have a student named Jackson. Ethan receives a call from Chris, who tells him that Jackson does not want to study with him anymore because he is scared of Ethan. He also says that Jackson has an injury on his foot. Ethan says that this kid is not normal. He himself must have injured his foot. He reveals that Jackson's dad himself told him that Jackson is overly emotional, so he can do these things. But Chris tells him that Jackson's dad does not even know Ethan. Ethan is surprised to hear that, and he wonders who the guy claiming to be Jackson's dad the other day at the mansion is. Then Ethan tells Chris the whole story, but Chris still says that Ethan is not allowed to work with them anymore. The next day, Ethan then goes out to look for a new job, and Jackson and Gavin are out there. Ethan and Jackson start yelling at each other, and Ethan ends up pushing him. Jackson then threatens him, saying that he is going to ruin Ethan's life. Jackson is attacked the next day, and Ethan is arrested. He tries to tell the detective that Jackson could very much be staging all this. He comes home, and now Annie starts doubting him too. She asks Ethan who Rachel is, and Ethan says that he has not heard that name before. But Annie tells him that Rachel was Jackson's mother, and she was murdered. She then asks Ethan if he was the one who murdered her. This is when Ethan reveals that he used to date Rachel, but she committed suicide. Now Jackson must think that Ethan is the one who murdered his mother, so he might want to take revenge. Ethan is kicked out of the house by Annie. He goes to the mansion the next day and sees a guy. Ethan asks him who he is, and the guy tells him that he lives there. This is when Teddy comes out, and Ethan yells at him, saying that all of them are trying to frame him. Ethan then goes to Jackson's townhouse to find some evidence against him, and he ends up finding a drugged strawberry. He is arrested there, and the detectives tell him that the townhouse belongs to Jefferson, who is Rachel's husband, and he died of cancer 3 years ago. Ethan is asked why he has been fired by the tutor company, at which Ethan says that Jackson accused him of being violent with him, so they fired him. Ethan calls Jackson and tells him that he accepts defeat and requests him to stop following him, but Jackson asks him to see him where Ethan killed his mother. Ethan goes to the lake, in which Rachel's dead body was found. Jackson says that there was no water in his mother's lungs, which meant someone killed her and threw her in the lake. Ethan is then attacked from behind by Gavin. When he is down, Jackson tells him that his mother was pregnant and the child was not his father's. He tells Ethan to accept the truth, and Ethan starts attacking both of them. He kills Gavin and then follows Jackson, who has run outside. He hides under the docks, and Ethan tells him that this is where his mother tried to hide too. It is now revealed that Ethan is actually a monster. When Ethan is just about to kill him, Annie gets there and catches him in the act. Ethan says that Jackson is the reason behind everything, and he has made him like this. Jackson then shoots Ethan and leaves. Later, the police try to find Ethan's body, but they are not able to find it. In the last scene of the movie, we see Ethan teaching another student. It is implied that he has survived. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.